Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted massive success or to write a New York Times bestseller plus, then do we have the You Have a Book in You show for you. Today I'll be talking with Mark Victor Hansen, one of the all-time leading authors who's written over 300 books and sold over 500 million copies, about one of the most life-changing and empowering books out there, You Have a Book in You. And since we have a book coming out in just a few weeks on automatic writing ourselves, that may already be out as you've heard this, that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about how to find outrageous success through the law of attraction or writing your book and getting it out into the world. That plus we'll talk about Bob Proctor, Brian Tracy, Raging Bill Shakespeare, Tanzania and X Prizes, Og Mandino, and the greatest salesman in the world, and what in the world going to the mattresses has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Mark. Are you ready to shine?
I'm ready to shine, Michael. Thank you for having me, and I love the names you put up with us.
Woohoo! Well, we're going to have a lot of fun today, and it's interesting. I had on Will Smith's voice coach, Denise Woods, just a week or so ago, and I'm thinking about Ali and 500,000 copies. If you aren't the greatest, you certainly are up there, Mark.
Well, thank you.
So,
according to Guinness Book of Records, I'm world's best-selling author. I'll accept nonfiction. I accept that.
Oh, that is amazing. So, since we're going to talk about writing a bestseller as a metaphor for life and for greatness in life, it means you've got a Guinness Book of World Records award for greatness. I like that. But before we dive right into things, how many rejections did you first get for Chicken Soup for the Soul?
It's amazing how many people. We had 144 people. I wrote with a partner, Dr. Jack Canfield, and said, "Hit the road, Jack," which is that old cliche. And I said, "Look, it's okay if you don't like him, but I'm a nice guy." The truth is, Jack's wonderful, but we did get rejected. And then we got fired by our agent who said, "Look, everybody's turning you guys down. I'm not wasting any more time." And that's cost him tens of millions of dollars over the lifetime of our book. So we went and sold it ourselves. We went to the American Bookseller. We took backpacks, 3-ring binders on our back, went from booth to booth to booth, and finished up. And finally, the third day there, it was in Anaheim that year, 60,000 authors and writers, publishers, everybody was there. And it just was like I died and gone to heaven, because Mark Twain said heaven for him would have been an endless library, and this was. It just was wonderful. A little publisher named HCI, Health Communications, not Hansen Canfield Inc., took us, and we took them out of the drink. They were bankrupt at the time, $17 million upside down, which we didn't know. And they said, you got to sell 20,000 copies at $6 each. That was sort of a high premium at the time. But we did it. And then they said, holy cow, everybody's wanting to buy the book. And so we said we'd sell 1.5 million. In a year and a half, we sold 1.3 million in a year and a half, from June 28th, 1993 to Christmas 94. And then next year I wrote down, and this is what people got flipped out, that I'd sell 5 million. And then next year I said we'd sell 10. And then I'd say we'd sell 15. And we did that for a lot of years. So, because, what you say is what you get, and what you write is what you get. How's that?
I like it. I want to go back in time, Mark. Way back. We're going back to, is it the American Booksellers Conference? Is that what you said?
Yep.
So we're back there. You've got a backpack on. You and Jack are going into campus, the place. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? What were you visualizing before you went on in there? You've already had 144 rejections. What is going through your mind?
Well, at the front end, I'd done 17 talks that month already, because May is a great month for speaking, because people are trying to get the second quarter going. Jack calls up and says, we're going to ABA. And at the time, quite honestly, I'd never heard of it, right? I mean, when you're not a best-selling author and you're self-published, you don't get to get invited there. And Jack said, look, I got us tickets. We're going. So my wife at that time, who's no longer with me, was not excited about the fact that I was not going to be home for 3 days. I mean, it was in Anaheim, so I was driving over. Mm-hmm. Jack and I met. We go into that place. Here's what happened that was astounding. Like, one of the stories we're using is a story, the guy, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten, right? Robert Fulghum, Dr. Fulghum. And he had one of the biggest churches in Utah. And here's, not a Mormon in Utah, in a Mormon state. And he also had a place over in Greece. Well, he's the first guy we walk in, and he's got a full beard. I knew what he looked like, but he came up and he said, I'm so glad you're going to put my story in your book. And he kissed both my cheeks. I thought, who is this guy? Because my mind wasn't, all of a sudden I'm seeing all the signs of all the best authors in the world. Now he said, you're going to really make it here. And I thought, holy cow, this is providential, because he didn't know me from a bottle of Vicks other than our picture was on the front cover of the book at the time. So I was in awe. And then we met all the authors, because if you look here, I'm in my library, I've touched at least 50,000 books. I haven't read everyone cover to cover, but most of them are highlighted and notated, and what I'm going to write about and think about, and tons of more books I was going to write and stuff. And I'm meeting all these people, and they're all shaking hands. We're getting pictures. We're having a time of our life. I mean, I am exuberant. No one's ever asked me the question you asked. We felt exalted and thankful. And then finally, the third day, we got to the little publisher who said, I read the book last night and cried on my shoulder. Gary Seidler, the two partners were Peter Begzo and Gary Seidler. And Seidler says, we'll take it, but this is what you have to do. And we said, look, we're so desperate. We didn't know we could have gotten distribution at the time, but we were so desperate to get distribution. We said, we'll do it.
What's interesting to me, thank you for sharing, Mark. What's interesting, I'm like tinkering. This means to meddle. And so I'm putting myself back into the eyes of going through you. And I'm feeling both a childlike exuberance. And while, I could be wrong, while there's an air of desperation, you say, I also sense some sense of inevitability. The energy's going up, the energy's going up, the energy's going up. And we know that we are magnets. You crank up the energy on one pole inside of you here, it's coming out in the reverse polarity there to suck things into you.
Correct. What happened is, here's what happened. We were doing talks literally around the country. Yeah. And Jack was in the educational market, and he'd written a book and sold like 300,000 copies of 101 Ways to Build Self-Esteem in the Classroom. I had written this great book here called Dare to Win, and sold like 360,000 copies from the platform. And it's, never got a publisher at that time. No, we got one later, and redid it. But it was amazing. People would say, that story's got to be in a book. We got to get it, and we want it for all our relatives. And it just, holy cow. I mean, we knew that it would work. Like what you said, it was inevitable. It was in our hearts, our minds, our soul. And that's part of why we did Chicken Soup for the Soul, because we said, hey, look, the soul of America is in deep doo-doo right now. I mean, and we thought just the soul of America wasn't hurt, because we've sold so many books literally around the world, and we're in, I think, 54 different languages now. It is literally the soul of the planet. Everybody needs a story to bolster them, to rebuild them, to rethink them. And that's why I want everyone to write it, because everyone's got a story that somebody else needs to read.
Fantastic. And so let's go back there one more time.
Please.
I'm thinking about your book, Dare to Win, and 360,000 copies, and what that did for you. My guess is, if we go back to your first book, correct me if I'm wrong here, you didn't know what to do, perhaps, but you went to the end game and envisioned the end in mind and then drew it forward to you.
Precisely. When Jack and I did it, and we knew we were going to do this book, I was writing a wild business plan, because I'm the business guy and writing a marketing plan. But I literally interviewed the 101 best-selling fiction and nonfiction authors. And I wrote down exactly what they did, not how to write. I think I've known how to write sort of since I was 16, and I had the greatest English teacher ever in history, Mr. Reinhardt, who we can talk about if you need to. But and Jack was third in his class at Harvard. So it's not a question of, are the two of us pretty good, and his grammar may be better than mine or whatever, because he was a Latin scholar and a Chinese scholar and humma humma. But the point is, we knew how to write. I wanted to know how to market so many books. And we interviewed like Scott Peck, who was a Harvard guy, a psychiatrist friend, Road Less Travel, which was #1 58 weeks in a row. We literally whited out his name on New York Times list, wrote in Mark and Jack, Chicken Soup for the Soul. We literally put it on the mirrors. Now, the metaphysics of this is that when it goes through the portal of the pupil into the depth of the soul, you take ownership of it, right? You live in the assumption of the wish fulfilled, Neville used to say, and then it must come to pass, because you're sending out the vibratory rate, consciousness, subconsciousness, the superconsciousness, and back. And it has to happen ultimately and inevitably. Is that what you're asking? Did I answer the question you asked?
Different question, perfect answer. So I want to repeat this. dear friend wrote The Road Less Traveled, New York Times #1 bestseller. I know you then followed for 58 weeks, and then you followed up and owned that spot. In fact, at one point you had 7 Chicken Soup for the Souls on the New York Times bestseller list at the same time. But you took his book, if I'm understanding, you whited out. What exactly did you do and then stick on your mirror?
Okay, so the New York Times list, which sort of looks like this, I think you can see it here on the wall.
Yes.
This is the New York Times bestseller list here, and here's the USA Today, and here's Publishers Weekly, right? So I literally have lots of the 59 of those. I have 59 times #1 New York Times, and I've got the most series sold ever according to Guinness Book of Records again. The point is, he was #1 in the category we wanted to be on. There's hardbound, hardbound, oversized trade, and mass books, 3 kinds of books. And we wanted to control or be the biggest in that. And he was in the oversized trade. So that's what we decided to do. But we literally whited out his name on the New York Times Sunday thing. We bought the New York Times paper, whited out his thing with whiteout. Do you remember whiteout in the old days?
Oh yeah, with typewriters and everything. And I still actually use it. If I adjust the saddle on my bicycle, I will put whiteout on the seat post so I can adjust it without hurting anything.
Wow. When we bicycle together, you're going to have to show me that. I am a bicycle addict, as you may know.
And I raced in Europe.
Sorry?
So I used to race bicycles in Europe. I was a pro cyclist. So we'll talk shop.
Yeah. When I was 9 years old, I got addicted to, we were in Europe. My daddy took us he's Danish and mom, as you know, and I saw all the low handlebar racing bicycles. They weren't in America yet, so I wanted to buy one. I had to pay for it myself, so I got, I sold more greeting cards than anyone and had enough money to buy one. Equivalently a Trek, which is today like a $4,000 bike or more. Depends on all the stuff. Anyhow, back to it. So we whited that out. We saw that we were #1. We put it on the mirror in my office, my home, Jack's office, and Jack's home. We were living in the image of the wish fulfilled. We were there before we got there. That's what you're asking, I think.
Yes. And what I'm also asking is, when we talk about, and we're using book as a metaphor, though I want to dive in and give people specific tips to be able to write their own book, because everybody does have a story in them. But you went beyond the story. You and Jack at some point sat down, you had interviewed 101 people, and you not only asked, how do we write a mega bestseller? What do we want the end to this look like? What do we want it to do for people? And then let's engineer it with the end in mind, as if that's already here, which is a completely different way of looking at things. It's law of attraction in action, but usually people jump in before they know where they're going with things.
Precisely. I want to start with the market and say, what will the market buy? And that's why one of the points I make, and you have a book in you, I say, start with the end in mind. Where do you want this to go? How many people do you want to read? Why will they read it? What is the benefits to them? And I teach, the first thing I teach is you got to have a mega best-selling title. So you have a book in you. There's no question. This isn't about laundry. This isn't about sewing. This isn't about knitting or cooking. It's about one thing. You have a book in you. And the same with Chicken Soup. Chicken Soup, everyone knows, in the old days was called Jewish penicillin, but every grandmother and mother gave it to you. If you were sick, you'd get well. And what we're doing is saying, look, we're only going to do 3-page stories because that's most the average person will read while they're in either the bathroom or the bedroom before they go to sleep at night. So we said, we got to have this ready and ready to rock and roll.
Very good. And you inoculated a lot of people. Let's go to the let's go to the book cover, because before this interview today, I read your book. We sit back, Jessica and myself, and we say, what is this about? How is this going to help people? And what does the title look like? We drive through the title that helps focus everything. And if we don't have the title, it seems like we almost don't want to have you on air because there's not going to be the focus. That's like the energy ball for everything, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. And like your book title is just perfect because everyone has potentially the ability to do automatic writing. And I took a class, the automatic writing. I can hardly wait to read it, actually. I thought you were going to send me a copy, but I will buy one.
We are sending you a copy as soon as they come in, which is supposed to be later today. today, Mark. So this is the first copy. I got this ahead of my publisher this week. And now I'm supposed to get the publicist copies in. And what's interesting, and let's dive back into your thing, is first off, I want to hold this. I want to sleep with this. I want to show this to everyone. I want to paw this. And I believe there's an energy, just like you are holding your book, in doing exactly just that.
Well, here's the point I was going to make is I wrote it, I think, in the book, and for sure we teach it in the classes. When I was really rocking and writing, the smartest woman in America, according to Harvard, runs the Mind Institute. There's Dr. Jean Houston. I went to a class with her and a great actress whose name, Ellen Burstyn. Mm-hmm. And we had the whole day of writing, and she translated us she would give us one paragraph up on a screen from Elizabeth Barrett Browning. We got in that zone, and then we could finish Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poem or anyone else's. Now you say, well, who else did that? Well, during the lifetime, you mentioned William Shakespeare, Willie. There was another guy out, Bacon, Francis Bacon, and Bacon used to read all that Willie did and then write his own stuff. So he was a second best-selling author at the time, but he was inspired, got into what you and I think would call the same word, the mental zone, where you're in tune with the infinite, because my cliche is that there's one infinite mind, right? One mainframe computer, God, whatever name you want to put on it, and then you and I are many frames off the mainframe. Is that acceptable and understandable?
It is, and I'm going to take that one step further.
Please.
You got into the energetic, you got into their costume, you got behind their eyes, you got into the frequency of their writing in harmony, in accord with them. And then from that frequency, it's natural because they are plugged into spirit, to source, to one mind, to consciousness, to Akashic field, whatever we want to call it, whatever we want to label this stuff that literally scientifically, go to quantum science, it's everything. You get into that frequency and the words can't help but flow.
So let's talk about that two levels. One is the actual creative writing that you talked about. Absolutely 100%. But I say that when you're done with a book, you're done 10%.
Thank you.
90% is, are you going to market it? Are you going to sell? Are you going to hustle? Are you going to ask the divine mind, give me the answers to how to market more of these better, faster, and easier than anyone's ever done before. And right now, because as you know, we've got another book out called Ask, which you were kind enough to interview us on. People can go back and look at it. Ask, the bridge from your dreams to your destiny. We are hearing about breakthroughs that are coming, a brand new internet that is cyber-proof, a brand new 2 or 3 soft social media companies that are going to be bigger than ever and promote people like you and I, which I'll gladly introduce you to when you want. It is an interesting time that in the book business. Let me go back through it. When I went bankrupt, the first book I ever came up with, Peale said, you have that story in a book. So the first book I did, I don't think I've showed it to you, is Stand Up, Speak Up, Win. I literally was doing just life insurance meetings, as you know, in Long Island, New York, Long Island. There are 2 branches, and Suffolk and Nassau, and I started Nassau, and then we went to Manhattan, and then we went to all the boroughs. But to little audiences of people need to hear this, little audiences of 5, 10, or 20 people, never more than 50, I said, look, this isn't a New York Times bestseller. This isn't a national bestseller, but it is my bestseller. And I want to assign it to you, your wife, your kids, and if you'll let me, even your dog. And they'll laugh. That's funny. But I sold 20,000 copies in 1974 at $10 each. That's $200,000. I tripled my income. I thought, remember, today that's like having $2 million. I mean, I had a brand new car. I had a house. I had a motorcycle. I had everything you'd want, bicycle. You know, the point is, the only thing I wish I'd done is write more, which is what I teach in this book, is don't write one book at a time, write 2 or 3, because when your mind gets in the ideas, all of a sudden you start to gush. And when I interviewed Steve Allen, the guy who wrote 7,000 songs, I think is the number, in 40 major books, and started the Tonight Show, and he was totally dyslexic, reading backwards and upside down. Steve said, look, I got 28 tape recorders all the time going on different books, projects, and plays that I'm writing and music that I'm writing, because you can never have writer's block on 28 subjects at the same time. And he said, do that. Isn't that cool?
I love that. And so let's go from there to, and we're going to jump around just a little bit, because I want to go from there to Brian Tracy. because
a great friend who I talked to this week.
he is awesome. We've had him on several times. Sounds like it's time to have him back on the show. He takes an approach that I talk with a lot of people about as well, about baby stepping in, because people think, well, I have to have the time to be able to write a whole book. And if I don't have that kind of time, I can't get started. What do you say about that?
We all have the same 24 hours that decides whether you use it. You say, well, when I become a millionaire, then I'll have more time. No, you're going to have less time because you got more responsibility. Oh, well, I become a billionaire, I'll have time. No. Look, yesterday I talked to one of the richest men on the planet, and his withhold were a couple. And what I said is, first of all, let's have the titles. Tell me what you think you need to share. And he says, oh, well, I'm a great entrepreneur and blah, blah, blah. I can't use his title because I gave it to him yesterday, because I help everybody that goes to HansenInstitute.com, and right now they can get the book for $7.97, and we give you a bunch of other very positive gifts. I'm also going to downline help people with a title, because once they got the title, it gushes through them. And then I say, hey, look, do it like Brian said, do baby steps. Start by writing. And because you mentioned Bob Proctor, when Bob and I were doing seminars together, we owned 2 companies together. We owned a Millionaire Forum, and we owned 3% Club. And Bob and I are great friends. He's a lot older than I am, but 87 years old, young, never old. But Bob, a woman came up to us and she was complaining to Bob, well, if I was rich like you, then I could write my book. And he says, wait a second, ma'am, have you got 1 minute a day? She says, yeah, I got 1 minute a day. What can you do in a minute? In 1 minute, you can write 250 words. And you do that 250 days a year. And at the end of the year, you edit it a little bit and you got your book done. You got a 200-page book, 80,000 words. And she said, I got no husband, 2 jobs, and you're telling me I got a minute free a day. I said, look, you could write it in the bathroom while you're sitting, whatever you want to do. Bob said, she never took the advice, but I took it myself. He wrote a book called Born Win. Yeah. I wrote the forward to it, as you've probably seen. And he sold 10 million copies. Well, if you made $1 a copy, that'd be $10 million. But he self-published, so he made more than that.
Thank you. Two really interesting questions come out of that. First off, when somebody says, I don't have a minute, or I don't have 10 minutes, or I don't have a second, the question that I challenge them with is, what are you getting out of not living your dream? Because you're clearly getting something out of making that, I have no other way to put it, excuse. You get something out of saying, it puts you in victimhood. I don't have to go for it.
Exactly. And so what I'm saying is, look, everyone's got one of these little cell phones. Every one of the cell phones has a little thing here called voice memos.
Yes.
There's never a day I don't dictate something I'm going to write. Like yesterday, I wrote a whole new thing I'm going to write. I can take you through it. But my wife and I, she says such profound things, and you know her very well because you've interviewed both of us. Is it, I said, hold on, honey. That's a whole story. And dictate it. And then she said, well, what are we going to do? I said, I'm going to transcribe it for you. And I just, take an extra half hour and transcribe it. And she said, wow, that is really profound. Because you can't, once you get into the zone, once you get into the vibration, once you get into the frequency, once you get in tune with the infinite, it's got to come through you. There's no choice. And what you and I are saying here, M&M,
thank you.
Rather than a candy, this may be candy for some of your mind, because some of you have been saying, I really do have a book in me. Everyone tells me I got a book in me. I ought to write that story. We're saying dictate it, transcribe it, write it, do it, pull out. There's somebody close to you, every one of us right now, that loves to hear your stories. And when you're doing your stories, just dictate it and then transcribe it, and then we can get it edited. And today, that's easy. You can get it stuff edited easy.
So on that note, and before I'll ask about editing, I think it was Og Mandino, and the greatest salesman in the world, who was following some. Maybe you can share his story, because he's another example of I don't have time.
Og Mandino and I are great friends. He did write everyone ought to read The Greatest Salesman in the World, and every one of his books. And I've got every one of his books here signed by him to me. And he did the forward to one of my books in the old days. So, Og and I were like this. Og was working. His whole story is worthy. He was an alcoholic. He lost his wife. He lost everything. The only job he could get was selling accident and health insurance for a combined insurance company owned by Clem Stone. He started writing letters to Clem Stone. Clem read them, and he said, I want you to meet me. And he was so down and out. He'd been an alcoholic. He decided that day, once he got a letter from this guy running his big company, that he could maybe write something for Success Magazine. He literally, you may not know this, walked from New Hampshire all the way to Chicago. Did you know that?
I had to, oh my
He did
God,
not
no.
hitchhike, he walked. Gets there, Clem, who I worked with a bunch of times in big rallies because he ran the PMA rallies, owned them and all that. You can go there if you want, but the first one was 17,000. I'm a little kid and I'm going to go, whoa, wow, is this cool or what? And now they're going to come back again. We can talk to that. Anyhow, he gets there. He becomes a senior editor quickly because Napoleon Hill dies. They put him in and he picks the stories, writes them. But he knew he had in his heart and soul to write the greatest salesman in the world. When I was at his house, he used to live here in Scottsdale or Paradise Valley, one of the two. I don't remember which. I was at his house a bunch of times. But he had 400 Bibles, and he said, I just knew God wanted me to write this story since I was 5 years old. My mother said, you're going to grow up and be a great writer. He said, the only choice I had was to get up at 2 in the morning and write until 5 in the morning. Now, I already had a full-time job that was 12 or 13 or 14 hours a day, drive home, and it's the only time that I wouldn't be interrupted by my own kids, my wife, or a ringing telephone or other people wanting to get their story in Success Magazine, which he was the senior editor of. And he wrote it, and it worked. And the amazing thing is that Rich DeVos read it, and Rich DeVos was just making $1 billion company called Amway and insisted everybody at Amway read it, and it just went like that. And thank God for Rich DeVos, and thank God for Og. Og was a great speaker. If you've ever gone online and YouTube to watch him, he's just superb.
Thank you. So this gets, if somebody, and I didn't know that about Og, if somebody is going to walk from New Hampshire to Chicago, they have to have such a sense of inevitability, of certainty, of conviction, because there is no way in hell, that's a technical term, there is no way in Hades they are going to make that walk unless they are convinced there is a reason for it.
Right. He decided he stopped being an alcoholic, decided he was going to be sober for the rest of his life, decided he was going to write because, he wrote some stuff about how to sell in a rural policy. He became one of the top salesmen and he's a wonderful guy, just terrific. He and his wife, Betty, and everybody, and his kids. So, but everybody, the point is, it was hidden inside him. And the reason I wrote, You Have a Book in You, and the line I like that I put on the back of the book is, the best book of all time hasn't been written yet because you haven't written it. There are people out there that need your book on automatic writing and my book on You Have a Book in You to inspire them, to give them what Zig Ziglar used to call a check up from the neck up, because from the neck up, you go up, and all of a sudden you're going to find time you didn't know you have. We call it strap time, whatever you want to call it, or you'll do dedicated time. And we're saying, look, if you write 22 minutes a day, in 1 year, your book is done. 22 minutes a day. Everyone can find 22 minutes, push back sleep, or get up before everyone else gets up. Like this morning, I was up at 5 o'clock. No surprise to you, but it just, people say, well, how do you write 312 books? I decided to write them, and we got a lot more coming. And it's exciting because I want everyone to have a success-filled, destiny-oriented life.
Thank you, which means we get to program our subconscious and program the field we go to sleep. You suggest in the book, we repeat to ourselves, and again, I'm using book as a metaphor, 101 times at night before you go to sleep. I am a great and inspiring writer and best-selling author. I am a great and inspiring writer and best-selling author. I am a...
Exactly, because whatever you add to I am, you become. I am as Moses said in the Old Testament that, who do I say sent me? When he says, I got to go to the Pharaoh, he said, say that I am sent you. So whatever you add to I am, like I am a great and inspiring writer who loves writing, whatever you're going to write, fiction or nonfiction or plays or movies or documentaries. I don't care what you write. I do care that you write, because when you crystallize your thinking, you make the world infinitely better off that quick.
How important is sharing our story with the world?
100%. And you're saying, well, it's easy for you. You're Mark Victor Hansen, which I hear every day. So I go, yep, I've been Mark Victor Hansen since I was born. But I literally came out of an illiterate immigrant family. Not that my parents weren't smart, but they didn't have an education. They were thrust out of Denmark when Hitler was coming in at 14 years old, got to America, there's no ESL, English is a second language back then. I was in remedial reading from first grade to sixth grade with a sweet little white-haired old lady who I'm very thankful for. And the point is, would you think somebody in remedial reading would become world's best-selling nonfiction author? Probably not.
I'm going back to my early days, second grade, just switched schools. They had me in the remedial class, green paper, inch line with dashes on it. And I was dyslexic and they didn't diagnose anybody as that. They'd be smacking my hand with the ruler and humiliating me to try to get good handwriting out of me and teaching teaching you, well, no, you had somebody who was supportive, that we may not go anywhere in life, but it's actually fuel, isn't it?
It is absolutely cruel. And we've got, in our blended marriage, we got 5 kids and 6 grandkids. One of our 5 kids is a special ed teacher, and she does just what I said. Out of her class of 15 in the morning and 15 in the afternoon, when school was happening last year, physically you could meet with the kids, not just electronically, which I'm opposed to, is that she found 4 kids that weren't stupid or they weren't Asperger's negative, they're Asperger's positive.
Thank you.
And they're reading at 5th and 6th grade levels or doing math at 5th and 6th grade levels. And she advanced them because most people were misread. I'm suggesting humbly that you and I were misread. Humble just means teachable and coachable and trainable. It doesn't mean lowly like a worm. And I say that respectfully about you, not knowing for sure whether you'd agree with it.
I would agree in that any trouble, challenges that I got into, I was bored. I was so far ahead of the game. And here, I couldn't necessarily get it out in the pretty handwriting they wanted.
And by the way, as you know, in our Ask book, we do the 2 greatest orchestrators of our time, who I probably told you about, but Quincy Jones, who made a little guy named Michael Jackson, and David Foster, who I'm a dear friend with. And both guys essentially got kicked out of school at 13, and yet they're the world's best orchestrators. For those who don't know David Foster, he writes music, writes songs for little people that you've heard of: Barbara Streisand, Quincy, Whitney, a little guy in Italy that is blind, just the prayer. I mean, all that stuff. And yet we could have crushed that with an educational system that is not 360 degrees. It's maybe 10 degrees of what potentiality is. And that's what I'm saying is everybody has a book in them, and everybody has something they know that everybody else needs to know. And unless we lock it into a book, because books, I say, are the wealth of the world, and everybody is better off when, like, if everybody goes to Hansen Institute and gets one of these for $7.97, and we give you a bunch of other gifts that are irresistible as far as we're concerned, and you get to talk to me about your title. It seems to me that this could leverage you. That's what my goal is. My goal is to be unique. My goal is to be transformational. My goal is to inevitably source and serve you to your highest, your best, your noblest, your most important self, which everybody, I hope, is ready to do that so they can beat in their chest and say, doesn't matter how old I am, how young I am, how educated I am, how money I have or don't have, or what's going right or wrong in my life, I could write this book and change me and change my world because it opens your awareness.
Thank you. And one of the key things in there in changing me, when you get a book out, even if you only sell a copy to your grandma and maybe for a penny, it doesn't matter. The fact that you did that, what is it? Energy goes where attention flows, or vice versa. What I mean by that, there's a word I've been has popped into my consciousness from automatic writing recently, attenergy, which is the combination of attention and energy together. Once you put the attention on getting this done and you actually get your book done, or any project, but if you get a book done, I can't believe I'm going to say this, you are God. You have just climbed the mountain. And if you can do that, you can do anything.
By the way, not only is it true, but one of the other guys that we loved reading was the guy who wrote Michael Crichton. Dr. Crichton was an MD. He became a writer when he found out that was a mountain he wanted to climb. And then once he wrote all these books like Jurassic Park, and everybody's seen his movies, Great Runaway Railroad, just tons of movies. And I loved them, but all of them were books first. And I read everything from him, but then he wrote a book called Travels, and Bob and I read it, and he literally climbed Kilimanjaro, which is in Africa. And we said, wait a second, he's our hero. We'll go do that. And that's what writing is all about. I would never, before I read that, I wouldn't have told you. Now I've climbed Whitney, the highest mountain here. I've climbed Kilimanjaro. I've climbed Fuji. I've climbed, in Japan. And I can take you around the world in Machu Picchu in Peru. And you'd say, well, wait a second. Why'd you do that? I read one guy did it. And I said, hey, wait a second. If he can do it, I can do it. And yesterday, a guy said, hey, wait a second. In book business, Mark, you are Roger Bannister. Do you remember who Roger Bannister was?
4 Minute Mile, of course.
4 Minute Mile. But nobody wanted before then because your heart would jump out of your chest. Everybody knew that. You die instantly. Mm-hmm. But the minute he did it, in the next week, 119 people did it. And I am trying to be Roger Bannister, if you'll forgive me the metaphorizing, of books. I want everyone to be able to metaphorically run their 4 Minute Mile or get to the top of their mountain. And you and I don't want to tell them what their mountain is. They got to go deep and use what we teach in our Ask book. God, what's your destiny for me? God, what's your destiny for me? Or universe, infinite intelligence, what's your destiny for me? 400 times before you go to sleep and do it. And then for your title, same thing. Jack and I in our respective homes said, mega best-selling title, mega best-selling title, mega best-selling title. And he called me at 2:58 in the morning and said, chicken soup. I said, for the soul. We both got goosebumps. Oh. Even though all those publishers are going to turn us down, we knew that that was truth. It was confirmation of truth.
So let's back up a few different directions I want to go in. First off,
thank you.
400 times each night. What's my destiny? What's my destiny? You're programming it into consciousness to bring you in the middle of the night or bring you in the morning or bring you in your shower. Here's what it is.
But I think it's both things, Michael. And I love the way you said you're programming. That's one level. But if you buy what my wife is, as a master hypnotherapist, is you're born with overendowed with 18 billion brain cells. You may be programming it at one level, but the other level, I say, is you're releasing it. You are,
beautiful.
I believe, and we can discuss this and positively, negatively, sideways, I don't care. I believe every one of us is coded at birth with a destiny at DNA and RNA level. And most of us don't get it released because you say, well, you're an engineer, you're a doctor, you're a nurse, you're a seamstress, you're a tailor, you iron clothes for a living, you're a janitor, all of which is a box, but that's not what you are. That's what you do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And what I'm saying is I think you are right on programming, but I think it releases. Then the other thing is you got to tell your sweetikins, hey, wait a second. I listen to Mark, and he's sort of a whack job, but he's a successful whack job. And he said, I'm going to wake up at 2:59 in the morning with the answer. When the answer comes, turn on the light and write in detail whatever the answer is, because you already know your mind is connected to the infinite.
And I love that it's releases because we have a challenge. So even right before this, I got in social media somebody saying, is manifestation only for some people? Like, does manifestation only work for those people who teach it? But what I see is two challenges with manifestation. First off, we come to it with our hands closed and we say, this is what I want. This is what I want. And that's not allowing the release to take place so that something even greater can come into your hand.
Well, I love it. You're right. You got to have open hand and an open heart, and back to the higher level, an open mind and an open soul to really let it all pour in through. I mean, as you know, Crystal wrote the fable of Michaela in our book Ask that is rocking in sales right now, one of the 4 fast-selling books literally in the world, because Amazon is sold worldwide and we're doing podcasts literally around the world. And it just is astounding to us. The people that every one of them are saying, I've never read a fable before, but boy, this has transformed my life. And I cried and I read it 2 or 3 times. I called my wife and kids in. I read to them. It just, great writing has a profound, visceral, truth-generating effect of illumination.
So let's go from there. You write about in your book the one question every writer must answer. And I'm going to talk here about, along those lines, the danger of a first sentence or a first anything in getting the energy flowing being perfect. I'll call this the Hemingway syndrome. I must be Ernest Hemingway from sentence number 1, or it's not worth doing. I better not do it.
By the way, I like the line that we're all imperfectly perfect. Therefore, I suggest that you write too much. And even Hemingway didn't edit the first time. Like when I was in graduate school as 7 years with Bucky Fuller, Bucky loved Hemingway, who edited 15 times, as did his teacher when he was becoming an admiral and trained for World War II back in 1916, before 1917. He was with Winston Churchill, as you know, was training the world military. And he also edited everything 15 times. Now, that's why you don't have to worry about the first sentence. It doesn't matter. Just do the best you can. And in today with a computer, thank God for that. I'm old enough to remember when you had to either handwrite it or type it, and you had carbon copies. and the paragraph, you wanted to move it, it was tough. But like when we wrote 1 Minute Millionaire, it was so amazing to me. When we wrote this book, we had the best editor at Random House. They'd given us $1 million each to do the book. And the editor said, look, on page 282, we need to put that paragraph back on page 27 and this paragraph on 27 to 268. And I went, how in the heck does look, I wrote it and I couldn't do that. But she could see what I can't see, because that's why you have you asked 10 questions ago, do you need a good editor? Yeah, you want a great, positive, optimistic, helpful, inspired editor. You don't want the school teacher that bleeds red all over your stuff.
On that note,
yes, sir.
Where do we go to find or attract into our lives that wingmate? Because to me, whether it's on video, whether it's writing, whether it's anything, the editor is as important as you are.
I would say minorly so, yes. The point is, there are phenomenal editors, and obviously Jack Canfield edited me and I edited him, and I could do stuff and put content together at levels that he couldn't believe, and he could edit me and find places I had faults in my grammar, which is fine. So either you mastermind that you're going to find that editor with your spouse or your mastermind partner, or you go whoever edited somebody's book in your neighborhood, and there's authors in every neighborhood. If you love their book and if you love their editor, and you ask them, did you love your editor? Like when we went to Random House, we not only had the sweetest lady running it, but we said, can we talk and look at the editors that you've got? Because this is the one we want. And because they had just published a bestseller of our friend, Dr. Deepak Chopra, I said, whoever did Deepak's editing in that 7 spiritual principles of wealth building, I think it's some title like that, or abundance building. And we got her, because you remember what we teach in our Ask book is you don't get what you deserve, you get what you ask for. So why not ask for the editor that's going to make your writing sublime, that's going to pull out the best out of you and say, hey, wait a second, this doesn't flow here. Now, I got to say that luckily I've got great co-authors, and between two of us, before an editor sees what we got, most everything I write flows, and that's why we sold 500 million plus books.
Thank you. So speaking about flowing, I want to talk about the concept of creating a sacred vessel from which something can either grow or appear. And we're going to use the example of Dr. Vincent Peale making 52 sermon files at the beginning of the year, and then saying, in essence, all right, universe, this week fill this one, the next week fill this one, because he made that sacred space for them.
What you're talking about is my minister in New York, and I had 2 ministers I go see every Sunday, one early in the morning, one late in the afternoon in Harlem. But Dr. Norman Vincent Peale wrote the book, Power of Positive Thinking, Help Us Get Out of the Depression with it, sold 25 million copies after all the publishers turned him down. So if you're going to be an author, we had to talk about publishing in a publishing house and self-publishing, because this is a brand new zone now. But let's talk about what happened. He was so frustrated, he threw it in a garbage can. Mrs. Peale, Ruth Peale, who was my dear friend also, and she's ran Horatio until she was 101. He died 101 a year before her. He was a year older. But she took it to her bosom, went to the publisher and said, look, my husband doesn't know whether this book's going to sell. I think it's the best book ever. We got a church with 4,000 people. It was the first mega church. It's called Marble Collegian Church. I know we could sell at least 4,000 of these. You as a publisher have made a tragic mistake, and I'm going to sit here until you decide to publish this book. So she was his vanguard. Wow. She was his wingman. She was tough and nailed. God bless her. When I used to go to church, I remember I'm a 20-something-year-old kid doing really well in New York, where I thought I was cooking, but she had me sitting in the front with the darts and the crafts, the biggest businesses in America, and Heinz's. And I was there one of the days when, can I do a quick aside? Is it of interest or not?
This is very interesting, so keep it going.
Okay, so Dr. Peale and I became good friends, and when he screwed up on a joke, he'd say, Mark, in my office after the service, and I'd go back and say, you didn't tell the punchline. Because when you're a speaker, you know, and I've done it probably in this interview, you get 2 or 3 paragraphs ahead and you miss something. Mm-hmm. Other people can see it, but you can't see it. Anyhow, this day, the President of the United States, Dick Nixon, has just come into office. He's there with his wife and his 2 kids, and they're up in the balcony with a lot of special ops, Social Security guys. And Peale said, ladies and gentlemen, everyone, close your eyes, fold your hands, and bow your heads, and we're going to pray. after he's done praying, he said, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, I'm going to introduce my dear friend, President Richard Nixon. He stood up and waved everybody. He says, I want you to know I know every one of his special ops and Social Security guys. Because when I told you to close your eyes, I kept mine open. It's him, and the audience fell over. I thought Nixon was going to laugh so hard he was going to fall over the top of the balcony. That's how cute he was. He was a diminutive guy wearing his black robes and punching his hands out, funny and light and bright and very positive. Power of Positive Thinking is a book I think everyone should read, even though it was written long, long ago, but it helped us get out of the depression along with Think and Grow Rich.
And the energy is still energy. It doesn't matter what decade, what century, what anything it is. Energy is energy. So going from there, what have you learned from Bob Proctor in being able to attract things into your life?
I'm going to have you do that question again, but I want to go to the first part of the question because I'm going to bifurcate your question, if you'll forgive me, Michael. The first part is when I was interviewing everybody, I interviewed Dr. Richard Alpert from Harvard and Stanford, who later became
Ram Dass,
who wrote Be Here Now. And he and I became good friends. But he said every author, Mark, should have in their back, what was your mental disposition? What was your mental energy while writing this book? Were you positive or were you negative? Because a lot of people don't understand, and you really see that in the world today, that a lot of people just have the world's going to end. We're having climate change. Humma. Right.
So the reason I'm padding my book right now is you are imprinting this with your energy, and you want to be printed what you have imprinted.
I love it. Because your imprint gets your outprint. How's that? I've never said that before, but it makes sense to me.
Your imprint gets your outprint out in print.
Yeah, impress you express. Right? At Impress, I was going to be world's best-selling author, and I am the only one in nonfiction. So, I'm very thankful. I'm humbled, but I'm very, very thankful.
So then that you were bifurcating this question. So that was the first part, was the imprinting, the energy, and the second part, Bob Proctor.
Okay. What do you want to do the second part of the question again, please?
Second part of the question would be working with Bob. What did he teach you, or what did you pick up, or what was a Bob-ism of attracting greatness into your life that came to you from working together?
Bob and I became best friends. What happened is I'd be teaching for State Farm and he'd be teaching for State Farm, and everybody says, you sound like Bob Proctor teaching cause and effect, except you add one more part to the triangle. I said there's cause, effect, and total resultant. And, and then when I was in Australia, and Everson said, Bob Proctor just came through here and you sound a lot like him. And I said, wow, I've never met this guy. And back then there was no internet. So I wrote him a long handwritten letter. Well, he calls me up and I'm going to be talking in Detroit. He says, well, look, if we're that much alike, I think I need to fly down there. Well, he came down to a talk I was doing with 5,000 people. I introduced him in this big church in Warren, Michigan, run by Dr. Jack Boland. He just wowed the audience. I said, look, it would have been corrupt for me as a friend to have Frank Sinatra in the audience and not let him sing a song for you. And they all go, yeah. So Bob and I instantly became best friends. Well, he's getting me international talks in Malaysia and Singapore, and which I had not worked, and wrote Mark's is famous from Taipei to LA. So you got to listen to him. He comes back from Taipei one time in LA, calls me up at 2 a.m. and said, everybody wants to be a millionaire, and why don't we have them become a millionaire in a year, and we'll write what are called MSIs, and we trademarked it together and patented and all that. No, didn't patent it, trademarked it and registered it. And we wrote 6 things about how to have multiple sources of income. Later on, I did multiple streams of income with Bob Allen, different Bob, and for 1 Minute Millionaire. But the point is, it was an original thought because we said nobody is a multimillionaire that just has a JOB, which means they're just over broke. We want them to have a real MBA, which is, I quoted it as a millionaire's bank account. And so we started working together, and then we started doing seminars. And he said, look, you can sell people in at $5,000 each. So the first seminar I'm doing, it's 2 to 5 in the morning. We're writing down the 6 things of MSIs. I do a State Farm talk in California. I remember going to this place, and I said, by the way, it's going to cost you $5,000 to get in. Well, Bob and I sold 267 people in at $5,000 each. My income went straight up, and so did his. And I thought, holy cow, everybody does want to be a millionaire, and I want to help them. And we really taught, and we created a lot of millionaires, and ultimately this book, I said, look, there's a million ways to become a million. There's one right, perfect, easy, and acceptable way for you. And that's why I wrote 1 Minute Millionaire. I don't care how you do it as long as it's honest, ethical, and moral.
Which brings us to the question, and thank you so much, Mark, of is there such a thing as aiming too high?
Okay, so here's what Bill Gates says. In the short term, we expect too much. In the long term, we expect too little.
Amen.
I really believe Bucky Fuller insisted that I write my 100-year goals, right? And I told you I'm going to live to be 127 with options for renewal. And I'm 73 a few days ago, and I'm in great shape. And so I expect high quality of life deserves a high quantity of life, especially if you're productive, creative, and contributing, which is what we're asking everyone to do here. So I don't think so. If you figure out what you really want, what your destination is, and you put it in writing, it'll manifest somehow. But different goals, different destinations are going to have different gestations. Like a chicky egg takes 21 days, a human embryo 9 months, elephant 2 years. So I don't think you can want too much. I mean, I really want to get 4 billion people on the planet that can't read to read, because I think the fundamental freedom is reading. And I can guarantee you're going to help me do that even before I've told you that was one of my goals.
I've been honored to help you do that. And I can see such incredible, I mean, you and I are both, we're channels, we're guides, we're teachers, whatever we want to define us, but
Yep.
we're also living, breathing, swimming in the word of other greats. The greats that have come before us have molded you and I.
I love that, swimming in by the way, and the point is, you can't, once you get into addicted, once you start writing, you start reading more. And when you read more, you think more. And when you think more, you're more open, and you start to understand even what our friend Mark Twain said, is that if you will travel, you get rid of bias, you get rid of prejudice, you get rid of racism and all the isms, because you wake up. Well, I think the same thing can happen to people who couldn't travel in the past. And now we can't travel currently because we're in this cocoon called COVID, which is a whole different issue. But if you keep reading, you'll be open and ready when it opens up again.
Would you say, so I got this question right before we started. It was a question on our YouTube wall, which was a question of, can only people who teach manifestation actually do it? And I always think of the two-step dance, which is first off, you play energy, but second, you step forward. But it actually, going to what you just said about reading the word of all of the greats, my guess is if you read their words, if you read their stories, if you read their journeys, you can't help but step forward.
I agree with that. And then I think there's A and B. I think you got to apprehend it, which is why you got to read or swim with the greats. And then you comprehend it. And then you can amend it with your own thinking and make your own impress. Because all of us are here to set records, to go to our own mountaintop experience somehow during our lifetime. And one of the things we got to do is write a book, because when you do transition out of physical form, which is, I'll talk to that in a different way in a second. The first thing that goes after your name is, what is the book or books that you wrote? It says, in my case, it'll be Mark Victor Hansen, age 127, and then Chicken Soup for the Soul series, 1 Minute Millionaire series, and the Ask series.
So then take us there, transition out of physical form. You said you would double back.
There's a movie everybody's got to watch on Netflix now called Near Death Experiences, which I'm sure you're a student of, given the shows that you do. And
I've had 2 of them.
Okay.
Not 2. That's not like a feather in my cap. I don't wish that on anybody. That's just twice the universe gifted me with 2x4s.
Yep. And I think that has happened to a lot of people that are watching this show, the gazillion of people that are watching. And I listen to the stories. Anyhow, the 3 things that were congruent is, number one, when they went to the other side and they saw themselves, and we did a lot of those stories in Chicken Soup for the Soul books, but they were told, your work back on the planet is not done yet. You got to go back. And sometimes they saw other people praying for them, so they had to come back, which is amazing. And then the second thing is that you're going to go back with more awareness than you had before, because you've now seen it, and you're not going to be afraid of death anymore, because it's physical form and life is eternal. I hope that's what your experience was. The third thing is the key line that goes throughout the whole Bible also is, all is well. Would you agree with those 3 tenets, that 20,000 people that died came back, and they showed on and just it's experience. It's wonderful.
My woohoo, my joy for life, my everything came out of those experiences. And I was on fire coming out. Ego came in the back door for me, Mark, because I knew my work was not done. And then ego, the first time around, came in and said, well, we've got to do. And I believe that's why the second experience happened, was to say, dude, you're not in charge. Did you forget that?
Right.
Lesson number one here. Oh, yeah, I get it now.
That's why we say you're a human becoming. You got to be it to do it, to have it. Everybody wants to have it without going through some of the transitory stages that you've got to do in your beingness. And that's why you said it so correctly. You're going to be a best-selling writer, right? And then you do the do, which will be easier if you be the be first. And then you'll have the have, which is the book. And then you get to do the marketing and the promoting and the hustling and the enjoy and the experience of meeting all your fan clubs.
I'm guessing you know him, Dr. Amit Goswami. He was featured in the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, an amazing quantum physicist. And he loves to sing one particular song, Mark. Doobie doobie doo.
Yep.
It's that.
I saw that movie a long time ago, 20 years ago, probably, whenever it came out. Yeah.
It's the balance. So a few last but important questions here.
Please.
What's the importance? I'm bringing it kind of full circle to those 144 gifts that you got. And you like how I put that because it's all energy. 144 gifts. In fact, if you had been with one of those other publishers, you may not be with where you are today because it needed to be the right publisher at the right time with the right energy, with the right motivation behind it. The importance of saying, next.
Yep. What happened is, because I was training salespeople predominantly in my earliest part of my career before I transitioned into training everyone. But when everyone says no to you, all you got to do is say next, because your sales there. And, my teacher, Bucky Fuller's great-great-great-grandfather started the School of Divinity. His name's Ralph Waldo Emerson. I'm sure you read him. And the first line of the essay on compensation says, every act has its own reward. And when I started selling seminars, trained by Chip Collins, he said, you're going to knock on 10 doors and one will say yes. And it may not be one of those, but every one of the doors you knock on, you'll get paid for later because it'll be easy sells. And you go, wow, like when you're starting to run the race to sell books, it's very tough. It's slow at the front end, but it's like a jet taking off. And I used to be on board of the world's biggest airline, Evergreen Airline, privately held. But when 60% of the fuel is left on the ground, did you know that when the plane takes off and then it gets into straight level flight and then you trim tab it and float? No, that's the simple answer. No, I didn't know that much fuel was used in the takeoff. Yeah, and it takes a lot of fuel to take off in the book business. But once I got off this last year, I don't know if you can see this or not, but this 2020, I was the author of the year, right? They just gave me this giant, beautiful Murano glass sculpture. So
can you is that possible to hold up there? Wow.
Yeah. There's author of the year.
Holy smokes. So if can you hold that for 1 second there? If you're watching this right now, even if you're listening to this, if you put your eyes in through Mark and you look at that and you feel what it's like to be holding that, to be Mark, to feel the glass, to look at this thing, and you embody this frequency, what will that do for them, Mark?
It'll make it happen for you. And that's what this whole show with you and I have done. We're here to empower, to impress, to expand, to illuminate, to help everyone reveal that they got the book. And if they just start writing it, it'll start to flow. It'll start to gush. And then if they get your book, on the awe of automatic writing, they'll gush with it. It isn't just for Shakespeare. It's not just for Bacon. It's not just for Mark. And it's not just for Michael. It's for everyone. And what if 8 billion people wrote what they knew that everyone else needed to know? And like you said, even if somebody paid a penny and just read it, your grandmother, she would go, that's my boy, that's my girl. One of those things.
A couple more people I want to talk about real briefly, and then we're going to cut this good. This is just beautiful, beautiful. We doing all right on time, Mark?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
So I want to talk about the deal Napoleon Hill was offered by the richest man in the world, Andrew Carnegie.
what part of the deal do you want me to do? I'm a scholar in him, and you mean, right, got it. Okay, so Hill is a 17-year-old kid going to law school at the time. Back then, you didn't have to go through all the undergraduate to graduate. And he wants to interview, and he's a great journalist, and he's writing for a publisher, and he says, okay, I'll just go interview the richest man in the world, which was Andrew Carnegie, and you ought to see all of his stuff on Netflix. You ought to go to his house at 95th and 5th Avenue in New York and in Dornoch, Scotland when we're open up again. I've been all those places. Anyhow, he goes to meet him and spends 3 days with him, and here's the deal. Carnegie says, I'm not going to pay you anything, but I want you to write the principles and philosophy of personal achievement and success. I'll introduce you to the 500 most important people in the world, but you've got to earn your own way. Otherwise, the book won't have any integrity. And of course, he ultimately wrote, the first thing he wrote was called How to Raise Your Salary. And that ultimately, he wrote the Fireside Chats for FDR. You have nothing to fear but fear itself. Confront your fears, make it disappear. And then in the height of the Depression, he wrote Think and Grow Rich. He was getting paid $1 a year because he was massively wealthy. He had a 600-acre farm. He had 2 Rolls Royces already. I mean, he'd cut the mustard in the world of economics. But he really wanted to share all the principles. And in Think and Grow Rich, he did 13. In Law of Success, he did 22 principles. And he taught some. I can tell you that I've lived it. Bob Proctor has never been a day without reading it. I've read it 200 times. Bob Proctor probably read 600 or 700 times one book, because he wrote it from the spirit of the 500 richest people in the world. I mean, he got to interview the guy he was amazed with the most was Edison.
Yes.
Edison said, I wouldn't spend 1 minute with you right now if I hadn't invented the light bulb, because whatever my decision is, I'm monomaniacal to finish it. But I just finished the light bulb, so I can now interview with you, Mr. Hill.
Now that brings us again, and I got to go back to Napoleon Hill in a second, but that brings us again full circle, because Thomas Edison is also someone who said next and blew up one more light bulb, and said next and found one more way not to make a light bulb, and said next and said next and said next.
Right, but the other thing he did, 2 things, is that he put a key in his hand and he would meditate.
Hypnagogic state.
Yeah, right, correct. Hypnagogic state, right. And my mind was already in that state. That's
my apologies.
Sorry. And he'd lay down on his desk and he'd say, okay, God, tell me what the answer is. And then he'd drop it. And when the key hit, he always had a new way. And finally, after 10,000 learning experience, all of which he wrote down, like I've asked you to do, is that he had the answer, and it was, filament and tungsten, which nobody had ever thought of. And so he obviously got all the patents, and he lit the world. Pretty big thing to do.
It's a concept we actually teach in the automatic writing experience. We've got that very story in there and how you can get into that state. Going back to Napoleon Hill, going back to resonance, so much coming right back full circle to the beginning. He was given such a gift of being introduced to these people because he could get in their frequency and vibration and then their story. But now he's in alignment with them, isn't he?
Totally. And the second chapter in this book is exactly that. Every one of you can get rich writing. That's why we put a money tree on here, because the second chapter says, interview your way rich. And you say, well, when did you do that? Well, we wrote Chicken Soup for the Soul, and the publisher wouldn't release it for 1.5 years. Jack and I each spent about $180,000 getting here, and it was smorgasbord of ways. And so I worked in 4 marketplaces, one of which was chiropractic, and chiropractic was crushed because the insurance had been pulled out from underneath them, so they had to have cash practices. So I knew the 21 men and women that ran big cash practices, like a guy in Dr. Nicotau, and he just did it with a rubber band. He said, here's a rubber band, put it on your index finger. What color is it going to turn real quick if the blood shuts off?
I'm going to go purple.
It goes red, purple, black, fall off. And he said, can a doctor get rid of it? No, medical doctor get rid of it. No, can a PT, a massage therapist. So I interviewed these guys and ladies and did a set of tapes, how to make over $1 million cash practice here in chiropractic. I sold $3 million worth of tape while I was waiting for Chicken Soup to come out. And I said, Jack, you ought to do interviews in education that really are transformative. And we know the people, but he didn't believe what I believe. So, because I believe I want to be vastly wealthy so I can really be philanthropic and source and serve the world to its own success, which we tie every book to a philanthropy. That's one of the great successes that I've had.
So, and you do it 10%. I'll call it a tithing. Some people are
Yeah.
scared of that word. I love The Richest Man in Babylon book, but you're taking 10% continuously and giving back.
Correct. And I did write a whole book on that, which I'm looking for right now just to show you. But yeah, and I tell people do mini book if you can't do a major book. Here's the book I wrote called The Miracle of Tithing, with people, businessmen say, what is a miracle of tithing? I said, you haven't tithed enough lately. We really wrote the Miracle of Giving, but it's a fun book. And churches have bought like 5,000 at a time to give to every congregation because I'm a third party, right? So the church needs more cash flow to stay alive. The bigger the church gets, the more it eats cash flow. The average church seat costs $18 to $38 per seat, and yet the average person's like, well, I'll just give $1. No, that's not the deal. If that person is serving your soul, you got to contribute. I mean, there's never been a day in my life once I learned this that we haven't tithed. And you got to tithe 4 ways. You tithe 4 T's: thinking, time, talent, and treasure. And that's why right now, Crystal and I are head of co-chair of Child Help, which has helped 10.5 million kids get out of abuse, neglect, and sex trafficking. Right. And we are doing the biggest, if you've got money, in May, we're going to do the biggest gala ever right here in Phoenix, Arizona at the Phoenician. So you're all invited, but the minimum cost to enter is $1,000 a person.
Name of that again?
It's called Child Help, ChildHelp.org, org. And it costs $1,000 a person. And I am honored to invite you all. Obviously, I'll be there in a tuxedo. Chris will be there in an elegant gown. You'll meet the 2 little ladies that are just so spectacular. They've been doing this. They're 84 years old each. They were both superstars before you were born. They did the Bob Hope tours. They were on every TV show. One of them, Yvonne Feddersen, dated a little guy you've heard about, Elvis Presley, for 2 years. So
very cool.
These women are super beautiful and super great, and they're super strong at 84.
Woohoo! Jessica and I, each morning, we do prayer work, we do meditation work together, we do drawing, attracting in, so energy work. When we do that, we always say a prayer to give 10% away of whatever comes in energetically, spiritually, physically, the works to help everyone, which makes it come back.
Multiplied.
Woohoo! Okay, last couple questions here.
Yep.
I had synchronicity. I was teaching a mastermind 2 nights ago, and I gave them a homework for designing and decorating their life. And I said, all around you, I want you to surround yourself with images and busts of people who matter most. And I saw this, politics aside, I saw this in the new, West Room of the White House a day or 2 ago for the inauguration, surrounding himself with the people that mattered most. And then you shared a story in this book about Wayne Dyer's writing table that I had no idea about.
Wayne and I were close friends, and he, I used to carry in his books in New York and help him sell them at the end, like I did Zig Ziglar, because I really wanted to learn this stuff from all my peers. And I'd recommend the same kind of stuff to you if I was open to doing it. And then went to Florida, and then ultimately moved to Hawaii and Maui, and we were together a lot of times there. But we were at his house, Crystal and I, and we had a lot of meals together. And Dr. Dwyer was just great. He was the biggest guy at Hay House. He just sort of made that thing happen for Louise Hay and the guy who runs it, the chairman, who's a wonderful CPA. Anyhow, but on his writing table, his spiritual table, he had all the pictures of all the greats, everyone from Jesus to Sai Baba to whomever. And because he spent his money trying to grow and know, he met as many of the living superstars of all times, and took people on trips with him to see Francis of Assisi's real place where he created veterinarians.
What's the importance of surrounding ourselves then with that energy?
The cliche is you become like the people you hang out with, and your earnings are the sum total of the 5 people you spend most time with. So my earnings have got to go up because I hang out with people much richer than me. I'm very thankful for it. And all I can say about my friends, every one of them to a man and woman, because this morning I was talking to a woman for an hour while I was spinning, that is 79 years young, and runs a $3.6 billion business and is just doing great stuff. And these people all want to contribute back, all want to help with you and I in the libraries and making sure everybody reads and take people to the next evolution of their own beingness. Because The planet has to evolve. And
Thank you.
a few of us that are on this show, you say, well, I don't have any obligation to write. Just drink it in, breathe it in, assume that you're going to be able to do the automatic writing that Michael's teaching you, and you're just going to go, your whole life's going to take off and be infinitely better in ways you cannot even suspect. You're going to have more mega credibility, not just credibility, more recognition, more self-esteem, more self-fulfillment, more fun. Your own family is going to love you more.
More. This is one time that I say more is a very, very good thing indeed. So on that note, where can people go, Mark, to find your book and find out more?
What a great line. So go to Hansen, Hansen, the Danish way, Institute.com, HansenInstitute.com, and you get this wonderful book for $7.97. And we give you two other things, like from blank page to bestsellerdom, like that. And we've written some stuff that it kept pouring out of me, because once you get in a zone, it's pretty hard to stop it. And then I want to help everybody to elevate them at HansenInstitute.com to be, do, and have everything a best-selling author could be, if that's what they want, or if they just want to do one and leave it as their family legacy, which I also believe in 100%.
Woohoo! Last two really quick questions. First off, is there a book that you're carrying around with you? Maybe it's Think and Grow Rich. Is there one book that you have by your side almost at all times?
Yeah, it would be, Think and Grow Rich was one of them for a long time, but I would say more, it's Neville's book called Resurrection. Neville is one of the great thinkers of all times. Have you read Resurrection?
I have not, and I'm already going. Is that a G&D book? Is that Mitch Horowitz? Is that Joel? Who is the publisher, editor who made the latest version? I want to get him on the show yesterday.
Well, I can help you do that, I'm sure. My publisher distributes some G&D, so they would do it. Are you with G&D?
Yeah, I'm with G&D as well.
Okay, they'll send you out a free copy by Horowitz. No sweat.
So fantastic. All right. Any last, okay. So doubling back, because we got off track there. Neville Goddard, what is it that, I can't help but think Dr. Joe Vitale stole his name in a good way to Neville-ize. What is the one key that you get out of Neville Goddard?
Neville Goddard came out of Barbados. It was here during the Depression when he was a superstar thespian actor on Broadway, dancing, singing, and all that. And he met another guy who got him into metaphysics and explained what metaphysics turned into metamagic, and that you got to live in the assumption of the wish fulfilled. And the guy got to understand spirit, and he started training it. And he'd have thousands of people in New York and fly out to LA when it was time, and and just did enormous good for a lot of people, and a lot of great, very famous people attended all of his seminars, because he was the Who, he and Emmett Fox filled what's called the Hippodrome. And unless I'm giving you the wrong number, I think there was seats for 12,000, and they filled 12,000 every week.
Woohoo!
Yeah, God bless him.
And he is absolutely phenomenal, because if you go with the end in mind, it's already there. You are just pulling
there
yourself.
is no time, which is really a hard concept. But Einstein said no time and no space. And you go, whoa, heavy duty stuff here, baby.
You beat me to the line, Mark, because I look at it as there is an infinitude of universes. Time is not real. And you can choose which universe, which future you want, which is already there, happening simultaneously by getting in that vibrational state.
Perfect.
Woohoo! Any last words of wisdom, Mark? Then I got to let you go. This has been phenomenal.
Oh, I've loved every word of it, and I look forward to sharing it with everybody. And I'm thankful for all of you that are watching and listening. And I really want you to get a copy of You Have a Book in You. Just go to HansenInstitute.com. And I promise you on my heart and soul that you are going to love it, like it, and benefit. Michael and I will see you in the future as a great and inspiring author.
Woo-hoo! You sounded a little bit like Jean-Luc Picard there.
Oh, I watched every one of those shows. As you
yes, as have I.
Taught everything to Roddenberry, lived here in Scottsdale, and literally could go out of his body to 3,550 AD.
Wow.
That's what happens when you're an author. You meet all the other authors that are a lot of times invisible, but are really the hidden creators of greatness.
And we can become them ourselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And
go to the next level.
And so for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get You Have a Book in You, and begin attracting and writing your greatest life today, and shine bright. Woohoo! That was awesome, awesome, awesome. This is an interview I'm going to listen over and over again. I'm going to have Jessica listen over and over again. I had to jump out of my seat. This is recorded about a minute or two later because I had to go Pookstar. I was just so excited by all the stories that Mark shared about all of the different ways that we can take our law of attraction, take our manifestation, take our writing to a next level in life. It all begins with energy. It all begins with frequency. And Mark, not only is he the Guinness Book of World Records #1 best-selling author nonfiction in the world, he's standing on the shoulders of giants by getting into their energetic vibration. If you get just one thing from the show today, it is to surround yourself literally, to surround yourself on your walls, to surround yourself in your books, in your masterminds, in your master classes, in going into automatic writing, in whatever it is. Surround yourself with the greats, and you can't help but become one of them yourself. With that said, if you want to learn how to turn your journaling into channeling and communicate with the greats, this is something that Napoleon Hill did. He had his boardroom. Thomas Edison, who Mark Victor Hansen talks about, was on his boardroom. He was speaking to Thomas Edison on the other side when Napoleon Hill did his automatic writing. You can learn how to do it by getting the automatic writing experience. You can learn how to go into automatic writing. Put your pen and paper. Not only will books spill out before you, quite literally, but you will be able to communicate with the greats on the other side, and you will be able to manifest and attract almost anything you desire. Again, it's at Amazon right now or your favorite bookseller, the automatic writing experience. If you love this show, click here to check out the next show. Big thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe and click on the bell icon to be notified of upcoming shows, YouTube premieres, live events with me. Love you guys so, so much. Shine bright.